3 hours. That's how long it took for my entire world to collapse. Not through a dramatic confrontation, not through a shocking discovery in his desk drawer, not through a confession wrung out in tears and accusations. Just a phone call he forgot to end. 3 hours of listening to my husband live a life I never knew existed. 3 hours of hearing him laugh, love, and parent children I'd never met. 3 hours of realizing that the man I'd shared a bed with for 18 years was a complete and utter stranger. My name is Hannah, and I'm 45 years old. I was married to Richard for 18 years. 18 years of what I believed was a solid, happy marriage. Not perfect, no marriage is but good. Comfortable, built on trust and shared history and the quiet rhythms of a life lived together. We had 2 children. Our son Matthew was 16, deep in his GCSE revision and dreams of studying engineering at university. Our daughter Grace was 13, all sharp wit and dramatic size, navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence. We lived in a lovely detached house in Guildford, Surrey, 4 bedrooms, a garden with a cherry tree that bloomed every spring, a kitchen I'd spent years making perfect, a life I'd spent decades building. Richard was a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company. The job required travel, lots of it. Scotland, Wales, the north of England. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, visiting clients, attending conferences, building relationships that kept his career thriving. I never questioned it. Why would I? He always came home. He always called every night. He always brought back little gifts, Scottish shortbread, Welsh honey, silly souvenirs from motorway service stations. He always told me he missed me. And I believed every word. The call happened on a Tuesday evening in October. Richard was on a work trip to Edinburgh, his 3rd that month. He'd left Monday morning, promising to be back by Thursday evening. Big client dinner tonight, he'd texted around 6. Might be late, I'll call when I can. I was used to this. The demands of his job, the client entertaining, the late nights in hotel bars discussing contracts and quotas. I texted back, no problem, love you, call when you're free. At 7:30, my phone rang. Richard's name on the screen. Hello, love, I answered, stirring the pasta I was making for Matthew and Grace. How's Edinburgh? Hey, his voice was slightly distant, distracted. Listen, I've just got to the restaurant. Can I call you back later? Of course, have a good dinner. Will do, love you. Love you too. The line went quiet. But it didn't disconnect. I didn't notice at first. I put the phone on the counter and continued cooking, assuming he'd ended the call. The children came down for dinner. We ate. We talked about school and homework and the usual mundane details of family life. It wasn't until an hour later, when I picked up my phone to check something, that I saw the call was still active. 01:47:23. 1 hour, 47 minutes and 23 seconds. Still connected. I frowned, assuming it was a glitch. I was about to hang up when I heard something that made me freeze. A woman's voice. Richard, can you help Sophie with her maths homework? She's struggling with fractions again. And then Richard's voice, warm, patient, loving. Of course, sweetheart. Come here, Sophie. Let Daddy see what's confusing you. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, unable to move. Daddy. He'd called himself Daddy. But Matthew was upstairs in his room. Grace was in the lounge watching television. Neither of them had spoken to him. So who was Sophie? I should have hung up. I should have called back and confronted him immediately. I should have done something, anything, other than what I actually did. I listened. I put the phone on speaker, turned the volume low, and I listened to my husband live another life. The next hour was a masterclass in devastation. I heard Richard help a child, Sophie, apparently around 8 years old, with her maths homework. He was patient, encouraging, exactly the way he'd been with Matthew and Grace when they were younger. I heard a woman, the same voice from before, moving around what sounded like a kitchen. Pots and pans, running water, the familiar sounds of dinner being prepared. "Sophie, go wash your hands," the woman called. "Dinner's nearly ready. Tell your brother, too." "Yes, Mummy." Brother? There was more than one child. My hands were shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. I heard Richard and the woman, I still didn't know her name, sit down to dinner with two children. Sophie and a boy called Jack, who sounded around 10 or 11. They talked about school, about a football match Jack had coming up, about Sophie's ballet recital next month, about weekend plans to visit someone's grandmother in Leeds. Normal family conversation. The kind of conversation we had at our own dinner table. Except this was a different table, a different house, a different family. A family I knew nothing about. The call continued for another hour. I heard Richard read Sophie a bedtime story, The Tiger Who Came to Tea, a book I'd read to Grace 1,000 times. I heard him say goodnight to Jack, reminding him to brush his teeth properly. I heard him and the woman, Sarah, he finally called her, settle on a sofa together. I heard the television turn on. Some drama I didn't recognize. And then I heard them talk. Really talk. "I hate it when you're away so much," Sarah said softly. "The kids miss you terribly." "I know, love. I miss you too, all of you. These work trips are exhausting." Work trips. He was talking about his time with us, his real family, as if we were the inconvenience, the obligation that kept him from his true home. "When do you think you can transfer to the Leeds office permanently? You've been saying soon for years." "I know, it's complicated, but I'm working on it, I promise. The children need their father, Richard, full time, not just a few days every fortnight." "I know, Sarah, I know, just give me a little more time." At 10:47 p.m., the call finally ended. Not because Richard noticed and hung up. Because my phone battery died. I sat in my darkened kitchen, the house silent around me, and I stared at the blank screen. 3 hours. 3 hours of listening to my husband be a father to children I'd never heard of. 3 hours of hearing him promise another woman a future that excluded me entirely. 3 hours of understanding that everything I thought I knew was a lie. I had recorded the last hour on my old phone. I had evidence. And tomorrow, I was going to use it. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. "Come here, Sophie. Let Daddy see what's confusing you." The tenderness, the warmth, the same tone he'd used with our own children when they were small. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of those 3 hours. Sophie, Jack, Sarah. Names that meant nothing to me 12 hours ago. Now they were all I could think about. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to Richard's study. I'd never searched through his things before. I'd never felt the need. He was my husband. I trusted him completely. What a fool I'd been. His desk was typically organized, files neatly stacked, pens in a holder, a framed photograph of Matthew and Grace on the corner. I'd always thought it was sweet, how he kept their picture where he could see it while working. Now I wondered if it was just part of the performance. I started with the drawers. The first two contained nothing unusual: office supplies, old receipts, a broken calculator he'd never thrown away. The third drawer was locked. I found the key taped to the underside of his keyboard, a hiding place so obvious I almost laughed. Richard had always thought he was clever. Turns out he was just arrogant. Inside the locked drawer, I found everything. Bank statements from an account I'd never seen. Halifax. Monthly deposits that matched roughly half of what I thought was his salary. Regular payments for what appeared to be a mortgage, utilities, and school fees. He was funding an entire second life, with money he'd hidden from me for years. I found photographs, too. Richard and Sarah on a beach somewhere sunny. Richard with Sophie on his shoulders, both of them laughing. Richard and Jack in football kits, standing on a muddy pitch. A family Christmas photo in front of a decorated tree. Sarah, Sophie, Jack, and Richard, all wearing matching pajamas. Matching pajamas. The same tradition we had every Christmas Eve. He'd duplicated everything, every ritual, every moment, every precious family memory. And I'd never suspected a thing. At the bottom of the drawer, I found the worst item of all. A marriage certificate. Richard James Whitmore and Sarah Elizabeth Thornton. Married at Leeds Register Office on the 14th of March, 2015. 9 years ago. We'd been married for 18 years, which meant he'd committed bigamy 9 years into our marriage. He'd stood in front of a registrar and made vows to another woman while still legally married to me. Sophie would have been born shortly after, then Jack. He'd built an entire family while maintaining ours. 2 wives, 4 children, 2 complete lives. And he'd kept them both running for nearly a decade. I photographed everything. Every document, every statement, every photograph. My hands were steady now. The shock had hardened into something colder, something more useful. Ray. I'd spent 18 years loving this man, trusting him, building a life with him. I'd sacrificed my career to raise his children. I'd supported every promotion, every late night, every work trip that took him away from us. And he'd been spending half that time with another woman. Another family. Another life he loved just as much, maybe more. I returned to bed around 5, just as the first gray light was creeping through the curtains. Richard would be home on Thursday. 2 more days. 2 more days to plan, to prepare, to decide exactly how I was going to handle this. Part of me wanted to call him right now, to scream down the phone and demand answers, to let the rage pour out of me in a flood of accusations and tears. But that would give him time to prepare, time to craft his excuses, time to manipulate the situation, the way he'd been manipulating both his families for years. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to be as calculated as he'd been. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work. I was a practice manager at a local GP surgery, a job I'd taken when Grace started secondary school, wanting to contribute financially again after years of being a full-time mother. I loved it. The routine, the patience, the sense of purpose. But today, I had more important things to do. I dropped Matthew and Grace at school with forced smiles and normal conversation. Neither of them noticed anything was wrong. I'd spent 18 years learning to hide my emotions when necessary. Today, that skill was invaluable. My first call was to a solicitor. I'd researched family law firms in Surrey late the previous night, red-eyed and furious, making a list of the most highly recommended. I chose a woman named Patricia Coleman, senior partner at a firm in Kingston, specializing in complex divorce cases. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said when I explained my situation, "what you're describing is bigamy, a criminal offense under UK law." "I know. And you have evidence. The marriage certificate, the bank statements, the photographs." "I have everything, including a recording of him with his other family." There was a pause. "A recording." I explained about the phone call, the 3 hours I'd spent listening to my husband live another life. "That's extraordinary," Patricia said carefully, "and potentially very useful. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I'd like to review everything you have." "I'll be there at 2. My second call was harder. I sat in my car outside the school for a long time, phone in my hand, staring at the screen. I'd found Sarah's phone number in Richard's hidden documents. A contact list, neatly typed with her mobile, their home landline, Sophie's school, Jack's football club. Everything organized. Everything compartmentalized. Everything designed to keep his 2 lives from ever colliding. I could call her now. I could shatter her world the way mine had been shattered. But something stopped me. She was a victim too, just like me. She'd trusted the same man, built a life with the same liar. She probably loved him just as much as I once had. And she had children. Children who would be devastated when the truth came out. I needed to handle this carefully. Not for Richard's sake, he deserved nothing, but for all the children involved. Matthew, Grace, Sophie, Jack. 4 innocent kids whose father was about to be exposed as a fraud. They deserved better than a phone call. I put down the phone and drove to Kingston. Patricia Coleman's office was on the 3rd floor of a Georgian building overlooking the Thames. Tasteful, professional, the kind of place where wealthy people came to end their marriages with maximum efficiency. She was waiting for me in a conference room, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver hair and the calm, assessing gaze of someone who'd seen every possible configuration of human betrayal. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Please sit down. Can I get you some tea?" "No, thank you. I just want to get started." I placed my folder on the table, the photographs, the bank statements, the marriage certificate, everything I'd gathered from Richard's study. Patricia reviewed each document in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is one of the most comprehensive cases of bigamy I've encountered in 30 years of practice. The evidence you've gathered is exceptional. I'm a practice manager. I know how to organize documents." A small smile crossed her face. "Clearly, now let's discuss your options." For the next hour, Patricia laid out the legal landscape. Bigamy was a criminal offense under the Offenses Against the Person Act, 1861. Richard could face up to 7 years in prison if convicted. But criminal proceedings were separate from divorce. I could pursue both simultaneously, or I could focus on the divorce and let the police handle the criminal case. "My recommendation," Patricia said, "is to file for divorce immediately on grounds of bigamy and unreasonable behavior. We'll seek full disclosure of his assets, including whatever he's been hiding in that separate account, and push for a settlement that reflects the scale of his deception." "What about the house?" "Given the circumstances, you have a very strong case for keeping the family home. The court will prioritize the children's stability, and you've been the primary caregiver throughout the marriage." I nodded slowly. "And his other wife, Sarah." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Her marriage is void. Legally, it never existed. She'll need her own legal representation, but from what you've described, she's as much a victim as you are." "I want to meet her." "I'm sorry. Before any legal proceedings begin, before Richard knows anything is happening, I want to meet Sarah, face to face." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "That's unusual and potentially complicated. May I ask why?" "Because she deserves to hear the truth from me, not from a police officer, not from a court document, from someone who understands exactly what she's going through." I left Patricia's office with a plan forming in my mind. Richard would be home tomorrow evening. He'd walk through the door expecting his normal life, dinner on the table, children doing homework, wife waiting with a kiss and a smile. He had no idea what was coming. But I couldn't confront him alone, not yet. First, I needed to find Sarah. The address was in Richard's hidden documents. 17 Oakwood Lane, Horsforth, Leeds. I looked it up on Google Maps. A pleasant semi-detached house on a quiet street, 3 bedrooms according to Zoopla, small garden, off-street parking. The kind of house a young family might buy. The kind of house Richard had bought with money stolen from our life together. It was a 4-hour drive from Guildford. If I left early enough tomorrow morning, I could be there by midday. Before Richard got home. Before he had any chance to warn her. That night, I sat with Matthew and Grace at dinner, watching them eat and argue and laugh the way they always did. They had no idea their world was about to collapse. "Mom," Grace looked at me with concern. "You've been really quiet today. Is everything okay?" "Fine, sweetheart, just tired." "Is Dad coming home tomorrow?" The question was innocent, routine. She asked it every time Richard was away. "Yes," I said carefully. "Dad's coming home tomorrow." But he wouldn't be staying long. After the children went to bed, I sat in the garden with a glass of wine and stared at the stars. 18 years. 18 years of marriage. 18 years of believing we were partners. 18 years of sharing a life, a home, a bed with a man who was living a completely separate existence. How had I missed it? I'd thought the frequent business trips were normal. I'd thought the late-night calls and early morning departures were just part of his demanding job. I thought the occasional distance in his eyes was stress or exhaustion. I'd never considered that half his heart was somewhere else entirely. I thought about Sarah too. What was she like? What had Richard told her about his other life, about us? Did she know he was married, or had he deceived her as completely as he'd deceived me? The bank statements suggested they'd been together for at least 10 years. The marriage certificate said 9. Sophie was about 8, Jack around 11. She'd built a life with him too. She'd trusted him too. She probably loved him just as much as I once had. And tomorrow, I was going to destroy everything she believed. It felt cruel. But she deserved the truth. We both did. I went to bed around midnight, setting my alarm for 5. The drive to Leeds would take 4 hours. If I left by 6, I could be there before noon. Before Richard finished whatever fake meetings he'd invented for his last day in Edinburgh. Before he had any idea that his carefully constructed double life was about to implode. I didn't know what I'd say to Sarah. How do you introduce yourself to your husband's other wife? How do you explain that the man she loves, the father of her children, the partner she's been building a future with is a fraud, a bigamist, a criminal? There were no scripts for this. No guidebooks. Just 2 women who'd been deceived by the same man, about to meet for the first time. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. In 7 hours, I'd be standing on Sarah's doorstep. In 7 hours, everything would change. For both of us. I left Guildford at 6 in the morning. The roads were quiet, just delivery lorries and early commuters, everyone moving through the gray dawn like sleepwalkers. I drove on autopilot, my body guiding the car north while my mind raced through everything that might happen. What if Sarah didn't believe me? What if she already knew? What if she slammed the door in my face? I'd prepared for every scenario I could imagine. I had the folder of evidence on the passenger seat, the recording on my phone, the marriage certificate that proved Richard had committed bigamy. Facts, proof, undeniable truth. Whatever happened, Sarah would have to face reality. Just like I had. The M1 stretched endlessly before me. 4 hours of motorway, 4 hours to think about 18 years of marriage, 4 hours to wonder how I'd missed every sign. Looking back, there were so many. The way he always answered his phone in another room. The password he changed monthly on his laptop. The business trips that seemed to multiply every year. The unexplained charges on credit card statements he insisted on handling himself. I'd trusted him completely. And he'd used that trust to build an entire second existence. I arrived in Horsforth just before noon. The village was prettier than I'd expected, tree-lined streets, local shops, a church with a medieval tower. The kind of place where families put down roots, where children rode bikes on quiet lanes and neighbors knew each other's names. Richard had chosen well. He'd given Sarah the same kind of life he'd given me, comfortable, safe, full of the small, ordinary pleasures that make up a good existence. The only difference was that ours was built on lies. Number 17, Oakwood Lane, was exactly as it had appeared on Google Maps. A neat semi-detached house with a blue door and a small front garden. A child's bicycle leaned against the hedge. A car, a sensible Volvo estate, sat in the driveway. Someone was home. I parked across the street and sat for a long moment, gathering my courage. This was it. The point of no return. Once I knocked on that door, there was no going back. Sarah's world would shatter. Her children's lives would change forever. And mine had already been destroyed. I was just here to make sure I wasn't alone in the wreckage. I crossed the street and walked up the garden path. The doorbell echoed inside the house. I heard footsteps, a chain being removed, and then the door opened. Sarah was younger than me. That was my first thought, petty, perhaps, but human. She looked to be in her late 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a casual ponytail and warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled politely at the stranger on her doorstep. "Can I help you?" Her voice was soft, northern accent, friendly in the way of someone who lived in a community where neighbors still looked out for each other. "Are you Sarah Whitmore?" A slight frown crossed her face. "It's Sarah Thornton, actually. Well, Thornton Whitmore. I never quite decided which to use after we got married." She laughed lightly. "Sorry, do I know you?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Hannah Whitmore. I'm Richard's wife." The color drained from her face. "I'm sorry, I don't. Richard doesn't have a... What do you mean?" "I mean I've been married to Richard for 18 years. We live in Guildford in Surrey. We have 2 children together, Matthew, who's 16, and Grace, who's 13. I pulled the marriage certificate from my folder. "This is our marriage certificate. Dated the 4th of September, 2006. We're still legally married, which means your marriage to Richard in 2015 was bigamy." Sarah stared at the document in my hands. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "This is some kind of joke," she whispered. "It has to be. Richard would never." I thought the same thing, until 2 nights ago when he called me from what I thought was a business dinner. He forgot to hang up, and I spent 3 hours listening to him help Sophie with her homework, eat dinner with your family, and promise you he was working on transferring to Leeds permanently. Her legs seemed to give out beneath her. I caught her arm and helped her to the step, where she sat down heavily, her face pale with shock. "This can't be happening," she said. "This can't be real. We've been together for 10 years, we have children, he's my husband." "I know, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I truly am. But everything he told you, everything he told both of us was a lie." We sat on her front step for a long time. I showed her everything I'd brought. The bank statements, the photographs from his study, the phone records showing calls to my number on the same nights he'd supposedly been with her. She cried. Quietly at first, then with great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I didn't try to comfort her. What comfort could I offer? I was the messenger of her destruction, the proof that her entire life was a fraud. But I sat beside her, because I understood. "The children," she finally gasped. "Sophie and Jack, they adore him. He's their father. How do I tell them?" "I don't know. I'm facing the same thing with Matthew and Grace." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Recognition. We were the same, 2 women who'd loved the same man, 2 mothers who'd built lives on the same lie, 2 victims of the same elaborate deception. "How long have you known?" she asked. 2 days. I found out on Tuesday night. I've been gathering evidence ever since." "And you drove all the way from Surrey to tell me in person." "You deserve to hear it from someone who understood, not from a police officer, not from a solicitor's letter, from someone who knows exactly what this feels like." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He's supposed to be home tomorrow, from his business trip to London." She laughed bitterly. "I suppose he means he's coming back from you." "Yes, he's due home in Guildford this evening. He doesn't know I know anything." "What are you going to do?" I met her eyes. I was hopping. We could figure that out together. Sarah invited me inside. The house was warm and welcoming, the kind of home that spoke of a family who lived well together. Children's artwork on the refrigerator, school photographs on the mantelpiece, a comfortable sofa with cushions arranged just so. It looked like my house. It felt like my house. Richard had created perfect replicas of the same life, just 300 miles apart. We sat at her kitchen table, the same pine farmhouse style I had in Guildford, and she made tea with trembling hands. "I keep expecting to wake up," she said, setting 2 cups between us. This has to be a nightmare. Things like this don't happen to real people. I thought the same thing. I still think it sometimes. Then I remember the phone call and I know it's real. Can I hear it, the recording? I hesitated. It's difficult to listen to. He sounds so normal, so loving, like the man we both thought we married. I need to hear it. I need to understand. I pulled out my phone and found the recording. The last hour of the call, everything from dinner onwards. I pressed play. Sarah's face went through 1,000 expressions as she listened. Richard's voice filled her kitchen, warm and familiar. Sophie. Eat your vegetables. You know the rules. The clatter of cutlery, the mundane sounds of a family dinner. Then later, come on, Jack, time for bed, big match tomorrow. And later still, I miss you too, love. These work trips are exhausting. Work trips. That's what he called his time with me, with our children. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. That's him, she whispered. That's exactly how he sounds, exactly how he's always sounded. I know. And he was talking about being with you, as if it were an inconvenience, an obligation keeping him from his real life. That's what hurt the most, hearing myself, my children, dismissed as an obstacle to his happiness. The recording continued. Richard reading Sophie a bedtime story, saying goodnight to Jack, settling on the sofa with Sarah. And then the conversation that had shattered everything. When do you think you can transfer to the Leeds office permanently? I'm working on it. Just give me a little more time. Sarah stabbed the pause button. He's been saying that for years, that he was trying to move up here full time, that his company was being difficult, that he just needed a little more time. She laughed, a broken, bitter sound. And all along, he was never planning to move at all. He was planning to keep juggling us forever. Until something forced his hand. Or until he got caught. She looked at me with eyes full of pain and fury. Well, he's caught now. What do we do about it? We talked for hours. About Richard, about our marriages, about the children who would be devastated when the truth emerged. I learned that Sarah had met Richard at a conference in Manchester 11 years ago. He'd introduced himself as a divorced father of two, whose ex-wife had custody of the children in London. He said he only saw them on school holidays, Sarah explained. That his ex-wife had poisoned them against him, that he was heartbroken about being a part-time father. There was no divorce. There was no custody arrangement. Those children he claimed to see on holidays, they're Matthew and Grace. Our children, living with me full-time. Sarah shook her head slowly. He even cried about it once, talked about how much he missed them, how unfair the family courts had been. I felt so sorry for him. I wanted to give him the family he'd lost. He's a master manipulator. He told us both exactly what we needed to hear. And we believed him, because we loved him, because we couldn't imagine someone being that calculated. Around 4 o'clock, the front door burst open. Mum, we're home. Sophie and Jack tumbled into the house, school bags flying, voices overlapping with stories about their day. They stopped short when they saw me. Who's this? Jack asked, looking at me with Richard's gray eyes. Richard's eyes, the same eyes I saw in Matthew every single day. This is a friend of Mummy's, Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady. From down south, she's just visiting. Hello, Sophie said politely, offering me a small wave. Hello, Sophie. I felt my heart crack. This little girl, this innocent child, had no idea that her world was about to fall apart, that the father she adored was a criminal, that the life she trusted was built on lies. She looked like Grace. Same shy smile, same curious eyes. Half-sisters who'd never met, who didn't know the other existed. Sarah sent the children upstairs to change and start their homework. Once they were gone, she collapsed back into her chair. I can't tell them, she whispered. How do I explain this to an 8-year-old? How do I tell Jack that his father is? You don't have to tell them today, but we need to decide what happens next. Richard is supposed to be home in Guildford this evening. He'll call you tonight, probably, telling you about his successful trip to Edinburgh, while he's actually in Surrey, with you. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. I want to confront him. Together, both of us. I want to watch his face when he realizes he can't lie his way out anymore. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. We made a plan. Richard would arrive home in Guildford this evening, expecting his normal life. I would greet him as usual, act as if nothing had changed. Tomorrow morning, I would tell him I'd planned a surprise weekend away, just the two of us. A romantic getaway to celebrate our anniversary, which was coming up next month. He'll never suspect, I said. He's too arrogant, too confident in his own deception. Where will you take him? I smiled grimly. Here, to your house, where you'll be waiting. Sarah's eyes widened. You want to bring him here? I want him to walk through your front door expecting a business trip and find both his wives standing in the same room. I want him to face what he's done. No escape. No excuses. Just the truth he's been running from for a decade. Sarah considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded. Saturday. Bring him here on Saturday. The children will be at my mother's for the weekend. Perfect. We shook hands across the table, two strangers bound together by the same betrayal, united in their determination to seek justice. And then I drove home to greet my husband. Richard came home at 7:30 that evening. I heard his car in the driveway, his key in the lock, his familiar footsteps in the hallway. The sounds I'd heard 1,000 times before. The sounds that used to mean safety and comfort and home. Now they made my skin crawl. Hello, love, he called out. I'm back. I emerged from the kitchen, wiping my hands on a tea towel, wearing my most convincing smile. Welcome home, darling. How was Edinburgh? He wrapped his arms around me and kissed my cheek. I forced myself not to flinch. Exhausting. Those client dinners go on forever, but productive. I think we've secured the Henderson account. Lies, all lies. He'd been in Leeds, with Sarah, with Sophie and Jack, reading bedtime stories and promising to move there permanently. And now he stood in my kitchen, lying to my face without a flicker of guilt. I made your favorite, I said brightly, shepherd's pie. Perfect, I'm starving. Dinner was an exercise in torture. Matthew and Grace were delighted to have their father home, chattering about school and friends and weekend plans. Richard played his role perfectly, attentive father, interested husband, devoted family man. The same performance he'd been giving in Leeds just 24 hours earlier. I watched him across the table, seeing him clearly for the first time. The easy smile that charmed everyone, the warm laugh that made you feel special, the sincere-seeming interest in everything you said. All of it was a mask. Beneath that polished surface was something cold and calculating. A man who could maintain 2 complete families for nearly a decade without a shred of remorse. What kind of person could do that? After dinner, I set the trap. Richard, I've been thinking. We were in the living room, the children upstairs, a glass of wine in each of our hands. The picture of domestic contentment. About what love? Our anniversary is coming up next month, 18 years. He smiled, that warm, loving smile I'd once treasured. I know, I've been thinking about it too, maybe a weekend in Paris. Paris? Another lie he'd never follow through on. Actually, I said carefully, I've already planned something, a surprise. His eyebrows rose. A surprise, for me. For us, a romantic getaway, this Saturday. I've booked a lovely cottage in the Yorkshire Dales, just the two of us. No children, no work, no distractions. I watched his face carefully. Yorkshire. Would he react? Would something flicker in his eyes? Nothing, not even a hesitation. That sounds wonderful, darling. I could use a break. Let me just check my calendar. I've already cleared it with your office. Spoke to Janet yesterday. She said you've got nothing until Monday. A slight tightness around his mouth, barely perceptible. You spoke to Janet. I wanted it to be a proper surprise. Is that all right? He recovered instantly, the smile returning full force. Of course, that's very thoughtful. Yorkshire, you said. The Dales, beautiful this time of year. I've arranged for Matthew and Grace to stay with my sister. Perfect, he raised his glass. To us, to 18 years. I clinked my glass against his. To the truth, I said quietly. He didn't hear, or didn't understand. He would soon. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. I went through the motions of normal life, work, school runs, meals, conversations, while carrying the weight of everything I knew. Every time Richard spoke to me, I heard echoes of the phone call. Every time he smiled, I saw the photographs of his other family. But I gave nothing away. I smiled, I laughed. I kissed him goodnight. I was the perfect wife, just as I'd been for 18 years. On Friday evening, I spoke to Sarah. Everything's arranged. We leave tomorrow morning at 10. I'll be ready. The children are at my mother's. The house will be empty except for me. How are you holding up? A long pause. I keep looking at him in photographs. Sophie on his shoulders, Jack at his football matches, all those happy memories, and I don't know what to believe anymore. Was any of it real? I ask myself the same thing. Does it matter whether he loved us or just used us? I consider the question. I think it matters to us, to how we heal, but it doesn't change what he did. It doesn't change the fact that he built 2 families on lies and never planned to choose between them. He wanted everything. He wanted whatever was convenient, and he didn't care who he hurt in the process. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I'll see you tomorrow, Hannah. See you tomorrow. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. Richard was in good spirits as we loaded the car, weekend bags packed, coffee in travel mugs, the easy atmosphere of a couple heading off on a romantic break. I haven't been to Yorkshire in ages, he said cheerfully, pulling out of the driveway. Beautiful countryside up there. I watched his profile as he drove. He looked so normal, so ordinary, the same face I'd woken up beside for 18 years. And yet he was a stranger. A man who could say he hadn't been to Yorkshire in ages, while maintaining a home and family there for nearly a decade. The lie rolled off his tongue without effort. We drove north on the M1. Richard chatted easily about work, about the children, about plans for Christmas. I responded in all the right places, my performance as flawless as his. 2 liars, driving toward the truth. As we passed Sheffield, I noticed him glance at the signs for Leeds. Just a glance, just a flicker. But I saw it. Somewhere in that direction was his other life, his other wife, his other children. And in less than an hour, he would walk through the door of a house he thought was safely compartmentalized from his Surrey existence, only to find both worlds colliding. Take the next exit, I said as we approached the Horsforth Junction. Richard frowned. I thought the cottage was in the Dales. Change of plans. There's somewhere else I want to show you first. Where? I looked at him steadily. You'll see. Richard's confusion deepened as we drove through Horsforth. Hannah, where are we going? This isn't the Dales, this is. He trailed off. I watched his face as recognition slowly dawned. The familiar streets, the local shops, the church with the medieval tower. He knew this place. He knew it intimately. Hannah, I don't understand. Why are we? Turn left here. But. Turn left, Richard. My voice was ice. He obeyed, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. And then we were on Oakwood Lane. I saw the exact moment he understood. The color drained from his face as we approached number 17. The blue door, the bicycle in the garden, the Volvo estate in the driveway. His other life. His other world. Right in front of us. Stop the car, Richard. His voice was strangled. Hannah, I can explain. I said stop the car. He pulled to the curb, hands trembling on the wheel. His breathing was rapid now, panicked. The confident, charming man I'd married had vanished entirely. In his place sat a cornered animal. How did you? He couldn't finish the sentence. How did I find out? You forgot to end a phone call, Richard. Tuesday night. Your client dinner in Edinburgh. I listened for 3 hours while you helped Sophie with her homework, ate dinner with your family, and promised Sarah you were working on transferring to Leeds. His face crumpled. Hannah, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been married to 2 women for 9 years. You have 4 children who don't know each other exist. You've been lying to everyone, to me, to Sarah, to all of our children for nearly a decade. I opened my door. Now get out of the car. We're going inside. Richard didn't move. I can't, Hannah, please, I can't face. You don't have a choice. I walked around to his side of the car and opened the door. You can walk in there with whatever dignity you have left, or I can drag you in. Either way, you're going to face what you've done. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Pure, abject fear. Good. He followed me up the garden path, like a man, walking to his execution. Each step seemed to cost him. His shoulders were hunched, his head bowed. The confident stride I'd known for 18 years had completely disappeared. I rang the doorbell. The wait was only seconds, but it felt like hours. And then the door opened. Sarah stood in the doorway. She looked beautiful, composed, dignified, wearing a simple blue dress that matched her determined expression. She'd prepared for this moment, just as I had. 2 wives, united against the man who had deceived them both. Richard made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Sarah, I can explain. Come inside, Richard. Her voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the warm, loving tone I'd heard on the recorded phone call. Both of you, come inside. The living room had been transformed. Sarah had arranged everything I'd sent her, the photographs, the bank statements, the marriage certificates, both of them, displayed on the coffee table like exhibits in a courtroom. Richard stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the evidence of his double life. He looked broken. Sit down, Sarah said. He sat. We stood over him, his 2 wives, united for the first time in the decade he'd been deceiving us both. How long did you think this could last? Sarah asked. Her voice trembled slightly, but she held herself together. How long did you think you could keep juggling 2 families, 2 homes, 2 lives? Did you have an exit strategy? Or were you just going to keep lying until one of us died? Richard's head dropped into his hands. I never meant for it to happen. It started and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't choose. I loved you both. I love you both. Love. I stepped forward, my voice sharp. You call this love? Lying to my face for 9 years, stealing from our family to fund your other life, missing our children's birthdays because you were at Sophie's ballet recital. He flinched. I tried to be there for everyone. I tried to give both families everything they needed. Accept the truth, Sarah interrupted. Accept honesty. Accept a real husband instead of a part-time fraud. She picked up the marriage certificates from the table. This one, she said, holding up hers, isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Our marriage never existed. I've been playing house with a bigamist for 9 years. She threw it at him. And our children, Sophie and Jack, they're illegitimate because their father was already married when he made his vows to me. Richard was crying now. Real tears, streaming down his face, his carefully maintained composure completely shattered. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I wanted everything. I wanted both lives. I couldn't give either of you up. So you chose to give us both half a husband instead, I said. Half a father for our children, half a life built on complete lies. I know it was wrong, but you have to understand. No, Sarah's voice cut through his excuses. We don't have to understand anything. We've spent years understanding, being patient, being trusting, and you used all of it against us. She looked at me and nodded. I pulled out my phone. This is a recording of your 3-hour phone call from Tuesday night. I've sent copies to my solicitor, who's already preparing divorce papers and a criminal complaint for bigamy. Richard's face went gray. Criminal complaint. Bigamy is a crime, Richard. Up to 7 years in prison. You didn't just break our hearts, you broke the law. He stared at me in horror. Hannah, please, think about the children. Think about what this will do to them. I am thinking about the children, all 4 of them. They deserve to know the truth about their father, and they deserve to know each other. I looked at Sarah. Matthew and Grace have siblings they've never met. So do Sophie and Jack. Whatever happens to you, we're going to make sure those children have a chance to be a family. A real family, built on truth instead of lies. Sarah nodded. That's the one good thing that might come from this wreckage. The children. Richard looked between us, his 2 wives, standing united, and he finally understood. There was no escape. No manipulation. No charm that could save him. The game was over. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Patricia Coleman had predicted. Richard was arrested 3 weeks later, charged with bigamy under the Offenses Against the Person Act. The evidence was overwhelming. 2 marriage certificates, years of documented deception, the recorded phone call that captured him living his double life in real time. He pleaded guilty. His solicitor advised him there was no point fighting it. The evidence was too comprehensive. The witnesses, both his wives, were too credible, and the public sympathy was entirely on our side. He received a 2-year suspended sentence and 200 hours of community service. It wasn't enough. No punishment could truly account for what he'd done, for the years of lies, for the children whose worlds had been shattered, for the 2 women who'd given their hearts to a man who never existed. But it was something. Justice, even imperfect, was still justice. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the confrontation. Patricia was magnificent, ruthless in negotiations, unwavering in her demands. Richard's assets were thoroughly investigated, revealing years of financial deception beyond even what I'd discovered. Hidden accounts, offshore investments, property purchased in false names. He'd been preparing for eventual exposure all along, building an escape fund that neither family was supposed to know about. Patricia made sure I received everything I was entitled to. The house in Guildford, fully mine. Full custody of Matthew and Grace. A substantial financial settlement that accounted for years of stolen money. And something equally important, the truth. Documented, verified, undeniable. Sarah's situation was more complicated. Her marriage had never been legal. In the eyes of the law, she'd been Richard's partner, not his wife. Her rights were different, more limited. But Patricia referred her to a colleague in Leeds, a solicitor who specialized in exactly these kinds of cases. Together, they fought for everything Sarah and the children deserved. Child maintenance, property rights, financial compensation for the years of deception. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this was easy. But Sarah emerged from the wreckage with enough to rebuild her life, to keep the house in Horsforth, to provide for Sophie and Jack, and to start again. The hardest part was telling the children. I sat Matthew and Grace down on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after the confrontation. They knew something was wrong. They'd seen their father arrested, watched him leave the house in handcuffs, heard the whispered phone calls between me and solicitors. But they didn't know the full truth. Not yet. I need to tell you something difficult, I began. Matthew, 16 and already half a man, squared his shoulders. Is it about Dad? Yes. Grace, my sensitive 13-year-old, reached for my hand. Is he in trouble? Really bad trouble? Yes, sweetheart, he is. I told them everything. Not the graphic details, not the recordings or the explicit evidence of betrayal, but the essential truth. Their father had another family, another wife, other children. He'd been lying to all of us for years. Matthew's reaction was rage. Pure, burning fury that he couldn't contain. "He's a liar," he shouted, standing up so violently his chair crashed backwards. Everything he ever said was a lie. Every football match he missed, every birthday he wasn't here, he was with them, with his other family. "Matthew." "Don't defend him, Mom. Don't you dare defend him." "I'm not defending him. I'm just asking you to sit down, to breathe, to let yourself feel this properly." He stared at me, chest heaving, tears of anger streaming down his face. "I hate him. I actually hate him." "I know, that's okay. You're allowed to hate him." "I never want to see him again." "That's your choice. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." He collapsed back into his chair, sobbing now. My strong, proud son, broken by his father's betrayal. I held him until the tears stopped. Grace's reaction was quieter, more devastating in its own way. She didn't cry, didn't shout, just sat very still, processing information that no 13-year-old should ever have to process. "Do we have siblings?" she finally asked. "Yes, a half-brother named Jack, he's 11, and a half-sister named Sophie, she's 8. "Have they always existed?" "Jack was born before you. Sophie came after." "So when Dad was at my birthday parties, he had another daughter somewhere else, having her own birthday parties without him." "Yes, sweetheart, sometimes." Grace nodded slowly. "That's really sad." "It is. For all of us, for them too." "Yes." She looked at me with eyes too old for her years. "Can I meet them someday, Jack and Sophie?" My heart swelled with pride. Even in her pain, my daughter was thinking about the other children, the innocent victims who'd been hurt just as badly as she had. "When everyone's ready, when you all want to, yes, I think you should meet them." "Okay," she paused. "Mum." "Yes." "I'm sorry this happened to you. You didn't deserve it." I pulled her into my arms. "Neither did you, my darling. Neither did any of us." Sarah and I spoke regularly during those difficult months. We'd become something neither of us expected: friends, allies, two women bound together by shared trauma and determined to emerge stronger. "How are the children?" I asked during one of our weekly calls. "Sophie's been having nightmares. Jack is angry all the time, but we're getting through it. Therapy is helping." Matthew refused to see his father last weekend, said he wasn't ready. Jack said the same thing. Maybe they'll want to see him eventually, or maybe they won't. Either way, it's their choice. That's what I keep telling myself. We can't control how they feel. We can only support them through it. And support each other. Yes, that too. There was warmth in her voice now. The wariness of our first meeting had long since faded, replaced by genuine affection. "Hannah." "Yes." "Thank you for telling me the truth, for coming to Leeds instead of just calling, for treating me like a person instead of an enemy." "You were never my enemy, Sarah. We were both victims of the same man." "I know that now, but it could have gone so differently. You could have blamed me." "What would that have achieved? More pain, more destruction. Richard caused enough of that already." "Still, thank you." "You're welcome, and Sarah." "Yes. I'm grateful I met you too. In the strangest possible way, you've become one of my closest friends." She laughed softly. "The world is very strange sometimes." "It certainly is. 2 years have passed since that phone call. 2 years since I sat in my kitchen listening to my husband live another life. 2 years since my world shattered into a million pieces and I had to decide whether to crumble or rebuild. I chose to rebuild. And today, sitting in my garden in Guildford, watching the cherry tree bloom the way it does every spring, I can honestly say I'm grateful. Not for the pain, not for the betrayal, not for the years I spent loving a man who never truly existed, but for who I became because of it. Life looks different now. The house is quieter without Richard's presence, but it's also more honest. There are no more lies hidden in locked drawers, no more secret phone calls made in other rooms, No more performances pretending to be something we weren't. Just truth. Painful sometimes, difficult often, but real. Matthew is 18 now, just finished his A-levels, preparing to study engineering at university. He's grown into a remarkable young man, thoughtful, principled, with a fierce commitment to honesty that I know was forged in the fires of his father's deception. He still doesn't speak to Richard. It's been 2 years, and he's shown no interest in reconciliation. I don't push him. It's his relationship to navigate, his boundaries to set. All I can do is love him and trust that he'll find his own path forward. Grace is 15, blooming into a young woman who astounds me daily with her empathy and wisdom. She's chosen to maintain limited contact with her father, occasional visits, supervised and brief. She says she needs to understand him, even if she can't forgive him. I respect that choice, even when it's hard to watch. The most unexpected development has been the children. All 4 of them. 6 months after the confrontation, we arranged the first meeting. A neutral location, a family center in Sheffield, halfway between Guildford and Leeds. Therapists present, everyone nervous. Matthew didn't come, he wasn't ready. But Grace did, and so did Jack and Sophie. I'll never forget watching them circle each other like wary animals at first. 3 children who shared a father, but had never shared a single moment. Grace broke the ice. "I like your hair clips," she said to Sophie. "They're really pretty." Sophie beamed. "Thanks, my mom got them for my birthday." And just like that, the tension dissolved. By the end of the session, they were showing each other photos on their phones, comparing favorite musicians, discovering they both loved the same books. Children are remarkable that way, more resilient than adults give them credit for. They've met many times since then. School holidays, long weekends, video calls in between. A sibling relationship built from scratch without the foundation their father should have given them. Last Christmas, for the first time, we all spent the holiday together. Sarah and her children came to Guildford. We cooked an enormous dinner, 2 families becoming one, not through marriage but through shared survival. The table was crowded. The noise was overwhelming. The joy was real. Matthew even joined us, though he stayed quiet, watching his half-siblings with an expression I couldn't quite read. At the end of the evening, as Sarah and I washed up in the kitchen, Grace came to find us. "Mum, Sarah." We turned. "I just wanted to say, this is strange. All of it is really strange." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad I have a brother and sister I didn't know about, even if how we got here is horrible." Sarah reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "That's the thing about horrible situations, love. Sometimes they lead to beautiful things." Grace smiled. "Yeah, I guess they do." Richard lives alone now. A small flat in Birmingham, far from either of the lives he destroyed. His career is over. No one wants to employ a convicted bigamist, especially in an industry built on trust and relationships. He sees the children occasionally. Brief visits, supervised contact. Sophie and Jack still love him, in the complicated way children love flawed parents. Grace maintains her careful distance. Matthew refuses all contact. I don't know if that will ever change. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely. I've started dating again. His name is Edward, a widower I met at a charity event 6 months ago. Kind, honest, refreshingly direct. The kind of man who says what he means and means what he says. We're taking things slowly. I'm not sure I'll ever trust completely again, not the way I trusted Richard. That kind of innocent faith doesn't survive what I've been through. But I'm learning to trust carefully, to verify, to ask questions, to protect my heart while still allowing it to hope. Edward understands. He lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. He knows about grief and rebuilding and the courage it takes to try again. "You're remarkable," he told me recently. "I'm just surviving." That's what makes you remarkable. A lot of people wouldn't have survived what you went through. Maybe he's right. Maybe survival itself is an achievement. If you're listening to this story, I want you to know something. The truth always finds its way out. It might take years, it might take decades, it might take a phone call that never properly disconnected, but lies cannot sustain themselves forever. They require constant energy, constant vigilance, constant deception. Eventually, the liar makes a mistake. And when they do, you have a choice. You can let the truth destroy you, or you can let it set you free. I chose freedom. I chose to stand beside the other woman instead of against her. I chose to build a new family from the wreckage of the old. I chose to model honesty for my children, even when it was painful. And I chose myself, perhaps for the first time in 18 years. So let me ask you something, friend. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything you thought you knew? Have you ever listened to something you weren't supposed to hear and had your whole world collapse? Have you ever had to choose between comfortable lies and devastating truth? If so, I hope my story gives you courage. Courage to listen when something doesn't feel right. Courage to investigate when the explanations don't add up. Courage to walk away from anyone who treats your trust as a tool for manipulation. And courage to build something new from the ashes. Because you deserve honesty. You deserve loyalty. You deserve a love that doesn't require a second family hidden 300 miles away. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have your own story of discovery and survival, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell me your truth. Because we heal when we share. And we rise when we know we're not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes the most devastating moment of your life becomes the first step toward the best life you've ever lived. That phone call destroyed my world. But it also set me free.